Some of you might be aware of this, but ASU actually has 9 design principles that the university revolves around. One of them is entrepreneurship. And the new one is actually principled innovation. And that's because ASU acknowledges that you're going to go out and become innovators. The question is, are you going to be the kind of innovator that's going to make the world a better place? The thing is, ethics, morality, virtue, do all of these things matter in innovation, or don't they? Are we just engines of greed? Is this all there is? There are a lot of things in the world that we actually don't need. We don't really need nuclear power weapons. We don't need mustard gas. It only exists for one purpose. And for that matter, bots have made billions of dollars for people. But is it good for the customer? I mean, dial 67 if you want. And that's the thing, not all products are good for humanity. And a lot of these things are overblown. Remember how Uber was supposed to create a whole new sharing economy and change the world? Hasn't really changed anything. An example of how people respond to real human tragedy is polio. Polio was COVID of its time, except far more worse. And the reason why is that when you contracted polio, a lot of people became paralyzed. And so there was so much fear in the United States over polio. I mean, people wouldn't send their kids to school and everything else. I mean, this went far beyond just like wearing a mask. And so with 500,000 deaths or paralysis, and mostly it was hitting children. So this was a huge human tragedy. And then what happens is Jonas Salk took 7 years, but he came up with a vaccine. He could have made a mint, but did he make money or anything? No, he gave it away. He didn't patent it, he didn't form a company. And what it came down to is he thought this was such a huge human tragedy that it wouldn't be right to make money off of it. That this cure belonged to humanity. What would you have done in this situation? Yeah, I would have made money. Not a lot of money, not like the pharma companies do right now, but yeah, make a profit. So if you bring about change, do you want to be something more? And so principal innovation came along. This is the model. Basically, when you look at these factors, intellectual, morally, civically, in terms of performance, what it does. How can we come up with solutions that can meet these demands? And examples of things that I've seen in my career that ethically probably weren't right is, for example, this group got pressured to hurry up and get these processes out. And so what they did is they removed the safety locks off a piece of equipment and exploded and almost killed somebody. I watched a manager that he was such a slave to his boss that his wife was in the hospital going into labor, and he called him up and he answered the phone. The black swan. Could anybody have imagined that they intentionally crashed the market so they can make money? And then there's Elizabeth Holmes with Theranos, who bullied her employees basically to lie and make up data just to keep the company alive. These are all examples of morally ethical things that come into play. And so how often does this happen? Well, you have a line that you won't cross. You'll do certain things, but you won't do other things. And then what ends up happening is you get closer to the line, closer to the line, closer to the line, closer to the line, and then you are on the line. And then what happens is, because it's such a small increment, well, if I could do this, then I can do this, then I can do this. And then what ends up happening is all of a sudden you look back and it's like, wow, I am way over the line. And a good example of that is the Boeing 737. And that's a consummate failure of project management because people signed off on that. And I've seen it before. I'm willing to bet they all caved in because upper management told them. And the worst things that you can do to a person in that situation is say, oh, you're not a team player. You're going to have a stigma about you. And Jello Biafra, who is lead singer of the Dead Kennedys, He once said that we don't lose our liberties all at once. We lose it a little bit at a time. And that's what happens when you keep moving this line forward. How do you, other examples in society where they kept moving the line and now it becomes acceptable? Well, before, we never had debt. The only time you have debt is when you go to war. But there was basically a culture, no, having debt is shameful. And so what happened, Ronald Reagan came along, he blew the debt for the first time. We weren't at war, but he did it anyway. Bill Clinton brought it down, and ever since then, no president is running without a deficit. And that's why it's so far out of control, because there is no penalty, so it's acceptable. In Beirut, under Ronald Reagan, 241 people died because a car bomb got through. The thing is, they didn't have any criminal investigations. They didn't do any of this political recrimination. Both parties got together and they said, okay, we have a problem. How are we going to fix the problem? And today, what do we have? Hillary Clinton, 4 die in Benghazi, and then we have 2 years of investigations, 800 pages, $7 million spent, and yet no indictments. And as you could see, the thing is, a lot of things you can kind of trace down to Reagan, and that's in 1980. All of a sudden, now crime became, and imprisonment became our big focus, and that's it. We focus on punishment as opposed to rehabilitation. The thing is, it's easy to be righteous and have the moral high ground when you're not in the game. But what happens when your neck is on the line? And so just because you can do something, should you? People don't ask themselves that much. And so this is the story of Virtual Nurse. The thing is, a lot of times in your career, you're going to be challenged to do the right thing. And it's 1998. And what's happening is that healthcare is facing accelerated jumps in costs. And as you can see through this line, they were projecting out, they were looking at how health costs were going up, and they just kept going, the slope just kept getting bigger and bigger. So naturally, they're concerned about this. The thing is, 56% of the budget of a hospital goes towards its operating staff. The thing is, the average hospital profit margin is 5.6%. And naturally, during COVID, hospitals were taking a loss because they only treated one kind. And so if personnel is a big cost, well, who can you pay? Well, you can't get around the physicians and surgeons. I mean, they need to get paid. And pharmacists, the people who dole out the drugs, yeah, they got to get paid. But who's number 3? The nurses. And so the issue with nursing is that after, the 1940s, all of a sudden, nursing costs just skyrocketed. They went up exponentially. And not only that, but there's a shortage of nurses. And that's why it was so darn expensive. There's no real easy answer. As it turns out, only 65 to 85% of all nurses work full-time. And the reason why is because it is a very, very difficult profession. And they feel underappreciated. They feel like they're in danger. It's like when everybody poo-pooed, oh, so what if somebody gets COVID? Hey, you work in the hospital during that time. Are you telling me they weren't scared of getting it? And then the job sort of starts to become unsatisfying. I mean, there's only so much, vomit and poop that you can clean up. And yet, we need even more nurses because the population is aging. And so, getting people is still expensive. And so what do? If you're paying the nurses, then somebody's got to be taking a pay cut. And not only that, but because of this, rural areas are impacted, that you can't afford to extend care to them. The thing is, low supply and high cost demand makes you push costs up. There's not enough supply, and there's a lot of turnover. So what are you going to do? Well, Costello Labs, which is multinational, multidisciplinary company, which has a hospital products division. And so they held an opportunity to review for new products. And their global multidisciplinary hospital products division And not only that, but they're innovative. But the way they typically innovate is acquire other businesses. But they want to start doing this internally because companies are becoming more and more expensive. So they hired this guy named Dr. Cho, not his real name, and he had a lot of big background in engineering. He also knows about smart systems. He knows about sensors and actuator. He was basically IoT before there was an IoT. And so he came up with the idea of virtual nurse. And the idea is that nurses follow the 80-20 rule, meaning 80% of their work is spent on only 20% of what they do. And so you can address this 20% where you need fewer nurses. And this is similar to what airline agents do. Before, you used to have 20 airline agents for one airline, and now you see maybe 2. What he thought of was trying to use sensors and closed-loop systems to automate the nurse's functions, non-critical ones. There's nothing like it on the market. Sensors can be disposable. Big money. Sensors only cost anywhere from 80 cents to $1 to make. You could sell millions of these things. And not only that, it's hard to copy because your algorithms and everything else. So either through trade secret or patents, you're protected. So I reduce the cost of nursing. I won't need as many nurses. So I go after the supply. And I also start removing the turnover issue because they won't have to deal with as many human issues. So you're in R&D and you've come up with this idea and you're pretty sure you can deliver on it. And the thing is, morale in the company is low. People want to see new ideas. So is this a good idea? Yeah, for those of you online, you're not going to be able to break up and talk about this. The question is, would you pursue it? And so you were brought in to come up with new ideas, and this is the best idea you can come up with. And so you totally believe it's a winner, that you can make this happen. Does this mean you should do it? And so the process of this whole idea thing is first you pitch the idea, then there's a review, then there's a second pitch, and there's a final evaluation if they want to get behind it. But in order, the way these things work, though, is you get support before you actually talk to anyone. And so these are some of the stakeholders that you need to get to know. So you go out and you talk to these people, you get them excited. So these people are actually your bosses. Would you start campaigning for this? And how would you go about it? You have to get buzz. You need a champion. And so you need to get one of these people totally juiced up. Well, as it turns out, the conversations went well. There's excitement in the room. People are thinking, wow, if we could do this for nurses, think about the suite of products we can sell people. We can start selling to family of products. The thing is, marketing wanted more feedback. They wanted to meet with customers and get their response. And so you make appointments to go to partner hospitals and follow nurses around. So you're feeling pretty darn good at this point. You're excited. You're going to go into hospitals and find out. So you go in and you meet patients, you meet doctors, you meet technicians, you talk to people and talk about their care. And then something terrible happens. By following these nurses around, you've gained new insight. What you find out is that healthcare is actually very intuitive. The thing that you never realized is that with nurses, they are very intuitive, meaning they're taking care of you day after day. If they hear your voice change, or your skin color change, or your mood start to change, they know that there's something wrong. Like, I was following a nurse around, and she said, oh my God, his skin color is changing. I'm like, what? I mean, he looked fine to me. And then as it turns out, that skin color change was changing because he was having kidney problems. And so no sensor I thought of mine could have ever figured that out. And so, so in terms of patient care, this revolutionary idea turns out to be a bad idea. What are you going to do? Well, option one is to keep going. You have the support of everyone. You have the opportunity. If you don't do it, somebody else will. That's typically the excuse of scoundrels. The thing is, if you pull this off, your career is on the fast track. And not only that, but you raised a lot of expectations at this point. Your second option is to stop. Why? Because the patients matter. This is not the right thing to do. However, if you back off, you're going to wreck your entire career at this place. And so you go talk to others, and every manager tells you that this is going to hurt your career. You're going to go from fast track to oblivion. You're going to look like a fool. What do? Well, you do pros and cons. You start talking to other people. You start flipping coins. Here's my piece of advice to you. What do you do when you're on these, coin flip kind of decisions? You don't know what to do. Regret is the second most common emotion we express. It's an emotion that stays with you through your entire life. You are in the gray zone. However, you can make regret work for you. Ask yourself one question. Where do I want to make mistakes? What can I live with? For example, if you're putting, and you're going to miss, would you be okay missing long or missing short? And everybody says, well, of course long, because then you give yourself a chance. Well, what if it turns out the back of the green is sloped, and if you miss, you're going to be sliding down a hill into sand? You're not going to have any chance to recover. So maybe your mistake is, if I'm going to make a mistake, I want it to be short. And with the basketball, do you go for the backboard, or do you go for inside the hoop? And so what can you live with? And probably the biggest challenge you'll have in your life is, should I do what my boss tells me or not, or do what I want? And I was in hell when I was part of my first startup. And that's that they asked me to do something, to go with an approach. And I said, no, it's not going to work. And they took a vote of 10 managers. And so you had the vice president there and the COO there. And I just got promoted to manager like 2 weeks earlier. It's my first managerial job. And all 9 of them voted yes. And then I voted no. The thing is, after they voted, 9 of them voted yes, they started to get up and leave the room. And I'm there like, wait. I thought you said this needed to be unanimous. Yeah, it is. How do you vote? I said, I vote no. Oh, that puts you under the radar of people right away. But like I said, the destroyer. So the thing is, the COO came to me and he said, look, if you follow along with everybody else, we'll give you all the resources you want. We'll let you hire people and you'll be thought of as a good guy. But if you go against us, you'll mark yourself as a problem child. And not only that, there's going to be real issues about you. Your neck is going to start to get very, very long. Well, I'm in hell. I don't know what to do. But this is what it came down to. If I failed and I did the best I possibly could, and I did what I thought it was right, I can live with that. Go ahead and fire me. You can't always win. You can't always be right. But as long as I do it with a good conscience and fair effort, I can live with it, that I could fail in that situation. On the other hand, if I did what they wanted me to do, and we end up failing like I knew we were going to, then I would spend the rest of my life kicking myself. Why didn't I listen to myself? The thing is, the new approach, I had no idea if it was going to work. No, really, it was 50-50. I had no idea. And, but I did know one thing. The idea we were working on had 0% of being successful. And so I'd rather have 50% than 0%. And as it turns out, it all worked out well. Everything worked. But my boss later on told me, you were this close to getting fired. And so you have to make these kind of decisions in your lifetime. But the thing about asking you, where do I want to make my mistakes, your intuition comes out. And your inner wisdom comes out. And more times than not, you're going to be right. So what happened? Well, this guy, Dr. Cho, met with the supervisors. They tried to talk him out of it. They said first they were positive and then they got negative. Like, if you back out on this, you're going to really hurt yourself. And I didn't change my mind. The thing is, right now, when they're talking about AI is going to replace doctors, whoo boy, we're going to do the same thing all over again. And even though it's 27 years later, I just think it's a bad idea. What it comes down to is there was no right or wrong answer in this, but there's the answer that you can live with. Where did I go wrong? Did I make a bad decision? And what it came down to is your first concern has always got to be with the customer. And so instead of getting everybody all excited about it, what I really needed to do was get more information. I jumped too quickly because I was too excited. So know who your customer really is. And so systems thinking would have helped here. If I had taken a broader view of all the pieces that came together, I might have caught this ahead of time. When you look at problems in a bubble, you lose a sense of right or wrong. And it's like in a movie. The bubble you watch some movies with is from the viewpoint of the bad guy. And so you start cheering for the bad guy. You don't think about that these people are murderers or criminals or whatever. And so what they're trying to do here at ASU is basically build you up with some level of conscience that when you go out into the world, that you'll think about people and that you'll help people. And that ethics and morality, those kind of things matter. And we live in an age right now where they just keep pushing the line. And once you push the line, guess what? Now everything becomes acceptable behavior. The question is, you have to decide for yourself. This is as far as I go, and I don't go any further.